Godzilla fans are weird, and I should know because if you haven't noticed, I happen to be a pretty big one, so I should know. One thing that I've always found really interesting is this weird Godzilla vs. Kong debate where, in 1962, King Kong and Godzilla were brought together to do a big fight. It was very cool. It was the highest attended Godzilla film of all time. I think technically if you account for inflation, it's also the highest grossing Godzilla film. It was a huge success. It revitalized the Godzilla franchise, and the reason it was such a big deal is because King Kong at the time was the most famous movie monster that there was, and so putting him together with Godzilla was a really big deal. Because they did that movie, there has been an ongoing fan debate between King Kong versus Godzilla, who's stronger, and it culminated in 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong, where things went pretty much how everybody expected. Godzilla beats Kong, and that's that. One thing that was weird is that the filmmaker, Adam Wingard, didn't have a ton of confidence in Kong's ability to pull off the fight, and rather than just portraying Kong as simply stronger, they had to give him an axe so that he could fight Godzilla. This has only fueled the fire of the Godzilla-Kong debate on is Kong even worthy of fighting Godzilla? Is he even remotely as strong as him? Toho has weighed in on this and said in their opinions King Kong and Godzilla should be equal strength. I mean, you've seen this back in the 1962 film, but as recently as a tie-in manga for Godzilla Kong the New Empire, they were stating this. I find it to be an interesting topic, and yesterday on stream chat was asking me about this, so I opened up about it a little bit. I'm constantly baffled and confused by the Godzilla Kong fandom debate. Godzilla -1. People want to see Godzilla fight another monster in the sequel to Godzilla -1. I agree. I would love to see Godzilla fight another monster in the sequel to Godzilla -1. So I made some fun photoshops, and one of the sets of photoshops I made was Godzilla fighting King Kong 2005, because a lot of us have said that Godzilla -1 feels very tonally similar to King Kong 2005. So I made that photoshop and I posted it, and people lost their minds. Godzilla would tear Kong into pieces. Sure, probably. These are the same people, however, who are trying to say that Titanosaurus would go toe-to-toe with Godzilla. They think Titanosaurus, Gorosaurus, people saying Kumonga. They're thinking these monsters, by all means, should go toe-to-toe with Godzilla in a future Godzilla -1 movie or whatever. Same with the Monsterverse. You talk about, if you have Titanosaurus show up in the Monsterverse and kick Godzilla's ass a little bit, people are fine with that because it's a Toho monster. It's just because King Kong's another franchise. That's why people get so upset about it. It's because he's another franchise, and it's because I think people sometimes get insecure about which franchise is more popular and which do people consider better. There's no other explanation I can wrap my head around. I just don't understand it. It confuses me. Why are we willing to say that Mothra can kick Godzilla's ass, but Kong can't? And the argument will be well, Kong's just a big gorilla. They have to give him power-ups. Well, Mothra's just a big moth. They have to give her power-ups too. Mothra from 1961 was so large that she could eat and kill the Showa Godzilla in a matter of seconds. And they scaled her down and weakened her, saying she's at the end of her lifespan so that Godzilla could beat her in a fight and there could be more drama. The same thing that fans are so upset about with Kong getting an upgrade so that Godzilla can go toe-to-toe with him is the same thing that Godzilla had to do to go toe-to-toe with Mothra. I find that super interesting. Titanosaurus is a dinosaur with a wind tail. I don't understand, man. I don't get it. I don't get why you'd be more concerned about Godzilla getting beaten up by King Kong than you would by Kumonga. You're totally cool to let Godzilla get his ass whooped by Kumonga or Kamacuras. Is it just because it's a Toho monster? It's so weird to me. I don't get it. I agree, King Kong. They just hate Kong. At the end of the day, they just hate Kong. Godzilla's just a big lizard with power-ups. Thank you, Chowders. Thank you. Okay, dude, you are so right. You just triggered the Winter Soldier in me. So I have seen an uproar in fans over the last few years genuinely wanting Zilla in the Monsterverse because, of course, Godzilla Rulers of Earth comic book came out, and in many ways it redeemed and revitalized the potential of the character of Zilla. All of the sudden, Zilla became really cool, and we got to see a scenario in which Zilla got to fight Godzilla, and they weren't equals, but they weren't that unmatched either. And it was awesome. And I have seen fans genuinely wanting Godzilla to take on Zilla in an upcoming Monsterverse movie. Of course, we all understand that Zilla would lose the fight. The same way that I don't think that there was many King Kong fans, including myself, and you can go back and watch videos as far back as 2015. I'm talking about how Godzilla's gonna win the fight in Godzilla vs. Kong, although I think I would prefer it if Kong won. I don't think there was many people who actually thought Kong was gonna win the fight, but it's weird to me me that people are like more chill with Zilla taking on Godzilla and potentially being an equal in a match with him than they are with Kong. Zilla's just a big lizard. If Kong's just a big gorilla, then Zilla's just a big lizard. And yeah, Godzilla's just a big lizard with power-ups. And you give they're like, well, Kong gets a new power anytime he has to fight Godzilla. Godzilla gets a new power every other movie. Godzilla goes burning mode in King of the Monsters. That's not something he could do in 2014. In New Empire, he can evolve himself into a hyper state, which is something he wasn't able to do before. They're both dumb, silly characters that can do whatever whenever the movie needs it to for the next movie, which I do think is an issue. I do think that they need to establish a better set of rules for these guys, but of course they're gonna give Kong some power-ups for the next film because they're trying to keep progressing the fights and to make them more interesting and more dynamic and whatever. It's just silly to me. I feel like part of the debate comes from deeply rooted lore. Mothra is like this divine god from the first movie, whereas Kong is more of a gigantic ape that could exist in real life. That very well could be. Godzilla gets an upgrade in like every MonsterVerse movie. I agree. If Godzilla gets an upgrade every MonsterVerse movie, I think Kong can too. Here's my opinion, is that a big issue is Godzilla gets upgrades that typically come from something he does, right? Or something that happens to him. Does this make sense? Like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Godzilla is struck by lightning, which then gives him the ability to magnetize at the end of the movie, as ridiculous as that is. In the MonsterVerse, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla is hit with a nuke and supercharged. Which, now that I'm thinking of it, why does the nuke that hits him and supercharges him, why does that's gonna kill him. That supercharges him to the point where he's gonna explode and die, but then in New Empire, he slurps up a ton of radiation and actually enters an energized state, which is even stronger than his King of the Monsters supercharged state, but it won't kill him. I've actually never thought about that before, but that is kind of a weird plot hole. But anyways, Godzilla is hit with a nuke, it supercharges him, and then Mothra allows him a way to vent his radiation, which lets him go burning mode. New Empire, again, he like slurps up the radiation, which it allows him his energized state, and then he kills Tiamat and absorbs her energy from her lair. I don't know why that doesn't kill him after the rules established in King of the Monsters, but it evolves him into the next state. The difference is Godzilla, things happen to him. Kong is given things. He just stumbles upon the axe. He's handed the beast glove when he's hurt. And so I think it makes it so that when Kong gets a power-up, it doesn't feel earned. And so fans get upset because it's like, well, Kong could never take on Godzilla without this thing that he just happens to discover a Godzilla killer axe, an axe designed to fight his current opponent. He just happens to find it right before going to another fight with him. He's given a beast glove that can just so happen to energize him and also deflect freeze breath. Whereas Godzilla, it's a little bit more active, although I think you could put a similar spin. Godzilla just happens to get struck by lightning. In Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, they just so happen to nuke Godzilla and energize, although that one's like baked into the plot, but you see what I'm saying. Like, I think you can diminish Godzilla's accomplishments the same way you can diminish Kong's. I just think it's more obvious that Kong has those issues. Like, oh, Mothra just so happens to kill herself to allow Godzilla to vent his radiation. She's trying to block Ghidorah's gravity beams, but it just so happens to allow Godzilla to vent his radiation rather than him dying. That's convenient, that it solves the problem the exact way he needed it to and allows him to kill Ghidorah. That's rather convenient. Or how about the time Rodan sacrifices himself and it just so happens to revive the brain in Godzilla's stomach to allow him to continue fighting Mechagodzilla in 1993? I think you can easily do that. I think it's easier to point it out with Kong. Oh, Kong just so happens to get struck by lightning, giving him lightning powers for the final fight of King Kong versus Godzilla right when he needs it. He just happens to find an axe right when he needs it. He just happens to be given the beast glove right when he needs it. I think it is easier to do that with Kong. And maybe that's why fans are less receptive to Kong getting power-ups. Whereas if Kong went on like a journey to craft the axe himself, it'd be a little more satisfying. And you know what fans have never complained about? Never one time? Kong gets thrown into the ship. He's wrapped up in chains. He's breaking out. It's this epic scene. He's pulling the chains. They're snapping. All of a sudden, one gets stuck. He looks over. He sees the propeller. He then uses the propeller in the fight against the Skullcrawler because it's showing a certain type of ingenuity. Like, he earns that. You know, it would be easier for him to just break that chain and move on, but he earns it. He earns the weapon. He grabs the tree. He strips it. He bashes the Skullcrawler in the head. He earns the weapon. I think that is the better way to do it, you know, to have them go through like a journey and to let it reveal something about the character. You know, Kong using weapons against a Skullcrawler, it reveals his intelligence. Whereas Kong wakes up with the beast glove on and it doesn't reveal anything about his character. It's just handed to him. Maybe that's why fans are so much less receptive to Kong getting power-ups. I don't know. I have no idea. It's kind of tricky when you have a character like Godzilla, a character who's known for being so strong, because the second you put him up against another character who can take him on, it seems to, for some reason, weaken fans' connection to Godzilla. Like he suddenly is less cool, or they're worried that other people will view him as less cool, or something. I don't entirely know. Fans don't love when Godzilla gets beaten up, although they will allow it if it's Mechagodzilla or King Ghidorah or something like that. But it's really interesting because these are the same fans who are also wanting to see a Godzilla vs. Gamera movie, which is something we all want to see. Godzilla vs. Gamera, Godzilla vs. Ultraman, Godzilla vs. Kong. But once you cross Godzilla over with another franchise, it adds this whole other layer of like whose fandom is better, whose character is better, and I don't think that's the point of versus. Stan Lee iconically says that when it comes down to versus stories, which character's stronger than which character, it's up to the writer to decide, and that's absolutely the truth. In the hands of a different writer, Godzilla vs. Kong would have gone much differently, and Kong would have won, and they would have found a way to portray that victory believably, because they're just fictional characters, and they can win or lose depending on the scenario. Godzilla takes on Superman in the recent Godzilla Kong Justice League crossover comic, and in it he essentially one-shot kills Superman with the atomic breath. Now, Superman does have a vulnerability to atomic weapons. However, the MonsterVerse Godzilla's atomic breath is not the same as the Toho Godzilla's. The MonsterVerse Godzilla's atomic breath, as we see in King of the Monsters, as we see what happens in San Francisco, it is full of Titan radiation, which is far more like sunlight. While they say that Godzilla's atomic breath has like a frequency closer to kryptonite than radiation or whatever, in reality, Godzilla's atomic breath is more like sunlight. It probably would have supercharged Superman. Or it wouldn't have done much to him at all. Toho Godzilla, though, that's gonna be a big deal for Superman. That's more atomic. Point is, the writers clearly made a choice to make Superman weaker so that Godzilla could take him down, and then there could be more of a threat and more drama in the story. Ultraman would slice Godzilla in half, and that's a fact that I used to get furious about, and I would fight people tooth and nail about it because I could not wrap my head around it. I just wouldn't allow Godzilla to be portrayed that way. But that's the honest truth. But if those two characters cross over, that will not happen, because they will beef Godzilla's strength up so that he can go toe-to-toe with Ultraman, or they will weaken Ultraman so he can go toe-to-toe with Godzilla. Godzilla versus Gamera. Godzilla's probably gonna wash Gamera, to be honest with you, but they will have to boost Gamera's strength so that the two of them can fight. Same deal with Godzilla versus Kong. And as I said, these power-ups, they're nothing new to the Godzilla franchise. They've been happening since 1962 when they boosted Kong's size so he could take on Godzilla and gave him lightning powers. At the end of the day, I think Fandom Wars are really silly and really childish. The characters we love should be allowed to cross over with each other and beat one another up in stories that we can have fun with and engage with, and it's sad that there's still so much hostility. I got booed at G-Fest because I said I was on Team Kong. People have been upset with me for years about this. People comment about it on message boards all the time about how I'm not a real Godzilla fan because I wanted Kong to win in Godzilla vs. Kong. Whenever I post a fun crossover picture of Godzilla vs. Kong on Twitter, people lose their minds about it. People are really mean about it, and I think it's really silly. I don't know. That's the video. Goodbye. Thank you all for watching. Big thanks to the people in the live stream. Big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Big thank you to the channel members. I really appreciate you guys. See you guys next time for the next one. D-Man, out.